All right, here's the thing with this. So it's 7:20 now, and when we started before, we had an audio issue. Hopefully that's fixed. And I can tell you this, nobody is more frustrated by this crap than me. It drives me absolutely nuts when the stuff that should work doesn't work. So I need some indication.
Yep, audio's on.
Okay, audio is on. So here's what we're gonna do. Whatever time it is, it's 7:20, we're gonna go an hour from now. So I apologize for those of you who patiently waited for us to kick off here. But in any case, we're just gonna start at the top as though we never started the previous setup. And I hope this is also going out to YouTube. I'd like to know that it does. If somebody's watching on YouTube, please let us know so that I know this is hitting YouTube and the GOA channel. And Krista, I know there's questions because you started before, so
yeah,
fire away, and I'm going to let my slow burn down.
We should answer John's question. When would you use a butterfly versus epoxy for a crack?
Okay, let's do this again. And this time actually with audio, which probably will make this a lot easier to do. All right, so if you could zoom in on a butterfly, please. All right, so here's what John is asking about. This is a walnut butterfly inserted into a pine tabletop. There's a little bit of a crack going right there. So with a butterfly, you get the mechanics, because it's a dovetail shape, it's a butterfly shape, a bow tie shape, you get the mechanics of bridging that crack, and that bow tie is mechanically holding those two parts of the board together. If all we do is put epoxy in there, we can fill the crack or we can fill the void, but you're not going to get the mechanics of actually holding it closed. So one of the things the butterfly does for you is it's going to prevent the crack from getting worse. So I guess what I do is if there's a knot in the board, so this knot would be an example. There's a knot in the board and it's got tiny little voids in it. Those I'll fill with epoxy. If there's a crack and I need to bridge that crack and make sure it doesn't get worse, then I'm going to use a butterfly, and maybe I'm going to use epoxy as well to fill the crack so that it's not just a hole. So hopefully that helps you out, John. Here we go.
All right, thank you. Vince would like to know, how do I make runners for a Ryobi contractor saw?
So if you're making runners for miter gauge slots, then there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. One, you should always use hardwood, and in the perfect world, if you own a surface sander, which I know not everybody does, so I'll talk you through a couple things here. If you own a surface sander, you can cut them oversized and then run them through the sander until you've skinned them down to exactly the right size. If you don't own a surface sander, you can try just ripping them to exactly the same size, and this is going to take some trial and error because you want them to be a good fit. You want them to be snug in the miter gauge slot. Most miter gauge slots are 3/8 deep and 3/4 inch wide. I think Ryobi is a little bit of a funky size. So another alternative is to solve this with a commercially made product, and I'm just going to walk this in. This is a runner that is adjustable. It's two pieces of, I'll say plastic, it might be phenolic, I'm not sure. It's two different pieces, and because of the way that these slots are cut, when you slide the pieces back and forth, it widens or narrows the net result. So I'm not sure what its narrowest dimension is, but it's pretty skinny. If you need it bigger than that, you slide it, that makes it wider. So this would let you make a custom runner of like 80 bazillion different sizes. You could custom fit it to a different slot. Made by Micro Jig. When I sit down and answer the questions later, I'll source this in the answer if you're interested in getting that for your saw bits.
Okay, thanks, George. We have a couple of questions from a viewer named John. He just watched the Jigs, Fixtures, and Shop-Made Helpers video that you did. When you made the circle cutting jig, it looks like you were using a 3/4 inch straight bit. Wouldn't it be easier to use something like a 1/4 spiral bit?
circle jig is for the bandsaw. And then, so keep in mind, if I had a beard in that video, I shot it at least 5 years ago. We started shooting videos 10 years ago. So if it seems odd that I can't remember the specifics of it, we've shot 125 DVDs. I don't remember using the router bit on the circle cutting jig. If I'm specifically cutting a circle with it, yeah, a 1/4 inch bit is going to take out less wood and be easier to manage. So sure, a 1/4 inch instead of 3/4 would be good. I just can't actually remember the application there, so I don't know if there was some compelling reason why I used a 3/4 inch bit. Sorry.
Okay, and he sees you use a Project Calc fractional calculator. John has had his for a lot of years and has yet to change the battery. How long have you had yours? And have you ever had to replace the battery? Keep up the great work and making woodworking so much easier for everyone.
Project Calc. So this is to woodworking, this is like the greatest thing since electricity. I'm pretty good at doing math in my head. However, I do like to double check my work. So if you're not familiar with this thing, I'll show you because it's crazy cool. It allows you to process fractions. So for instance, 2 inch 5/16 plus 3 inch 7/16 equal, and it kicks the answer out in fractions. So it's really cool. They're pretty inexpensive. They're like under 20 bucks. So was this John again?
Yep.
Yeah, so John, I've had this one, I don't know, years, and I've got an older model in the drawer over there that I've probably had a decade or more. Yeah, I don't remember ever changing the battery. I'm looking at the back of it here. I see there's a battery compartment, but yeah, I don't think I ever got in here and swapped the battery out. So was that the question?
Yeah,
I'm
that
lost.
was the question.
How frequently?
Yeah.
Never. I don't know. I'm sure it depends on how often you use it, but I don't know. Not for a long time.
Okay, thank you. We have a viewer who has a question about creating a bathroom vanity. So he's in the planning stages for the bathroom vanity. It will be melamine case with birch drawer boxes and cherry face frame, toe kick, drawer fronts, and doors. I will use Sommerfeld's tongue and groove system for most of the joinery except pocket holes for the face frame and air nails for select locations where it won't show. Do you think it is okay to use pocket hole screws to hold the toe kick on with melamine and threads in the cherry?
Yes. So what a wonderfully detailed question. Great job asking the question. Yeah, so back in the day when I was running a commercial cabinet shop and we made literally miles and miles of cabinets every year, pocket holes in the case to come through and grab the toe kick from the back was a very common application. If you want to give it a little bit more security, if you're a little concerned about, once the vanity is in place, what's going to affect that toe kick? The answer is like nothing. However, just for the sake of moving the thing around, if you want to make sure sliding it on your shop floor, you don't tear it off, do the pocket screws and then go back and add a corner block from the back of the toe to the side of the case. There is a melamine specific glue that you can use for that, and because normal yellow glue is not going to stick to melamine because of the plasticized surface. But that'll give you a little bit more security. Speaking of melamine specific glue, when we restarted here, I forgot, we have to thank the sponsor back here, Tight Bond Glue, who underwrites our lives so that these events are free for you. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I just remembered it right now, when you look at the page on WWGOA.com where you're watching this now, there's some information there about a download that you can get of projects. And that's worth having a look. There's some pretty cool stuff in there. Over the years, the website's about 5 years old. The contributing editors who write for me have contributed some really cool stuff. So every once in a while, we take a bunch of that stuff and we compile it into one packet. And that's what that packet is all about. So have a look at that packet, have a look at those projects. It's a free download, so you really can't go wrong. And it's a great way to just get some new ideas for your shop and your projects.
Okay.
Okay, that was the toe kick thing. What else we got?
Well, we have a viewer who says, I noticed while buying deck screws that some manufacturers use a Phillips head while some use a Torx head. Is any one better than the other? I kind of think Torx would be better.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a long time since I built a deck, so pick the one that you like for you. You probably get a little better bite between the driver and a torque, but personal preference.
Okay, great. Thanks, George. So, just give me a second, because now I'm having technical difficulties reading with these questions. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll do a commercial while we're waiting. Okay?
Okay.
So, we know you're George Vondriska, the managing editor of Woodworkers Guild of America. If you don't already do so, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and sign up for the very free newsletter. It's totally free for you. And I'm ready. I got it. It's going. Ready? Okay. So William says, I read your article on conditions when gluing rub joints is appropriate, but what I was curious about is whether the type of glue matters, specifically between yellow or white glues and polyurethane glues. Is either fine, only one, or why? And why? Thank you.
Yeah, so yellow or white glue would work for a rub joint. Polyurethane glue will not. The cure time on polyurethane glue is too long. So there you go. Yellow or white, you're going to be golden.
Okay.
How's that for a rainbow of color?
Thanks, George. Frank says he must have been on the gold the other day, because he said, the other night you used a couple of easy wood turning tools, a square tip one and a round tip one. Looking at the number of easy wood tools available, do you have other ones with different tips, and which ones do you use the most?
Let me show you something really cool. I'm coming right back. I'm pretty sure it's right. So if you're not familiar with them, the deal with easy wood tools is carbide cutter. So if you could zoom here, Krista. Carbide cutters. So one of the benefits is that you don't have to sharpen them. You either turn the carbide to a fresh edge, or you eventually replace it altogether. So in regard to different shapes, this is a smaller scale version of what I used a couple nights ago on video. Square and a round. These are detailing chisels. So the thing I was doing the other day was bowl turning. These I would use on spindle turning, pen turning, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of different shapes available. Realistically, that's good right there. Realistically, I'm probably using the square and the round the most. I do like this triangular or kind of diamond shaped one a lot. It's a great little detail chisel. So I would say, you know what, and I'm not sure my answer is your answer on that, because it's going to depend on what you want to do. If all you're doing is bowls, the square rougher and the round one are going to serve you pretty well. If you're doing a lot of spindle work, then you probably need a wider variety of shapes, like I showed you there.
Okay, thanks, George. We have a viewer who had been using some acid brushes to put on paint and stuff, glue, I mean, and he's now switched to silicone.
Okay.
Loves them. Wants to know, do you use them, and do you like them?
So yes, and yes. Acid brushes, if you've not seen those, have a very small tip, maybe 3/8 of an inch wide or less. The silicone brushes are maybe 3/4 of an inch wide or so. So if I'm doing glue over a broader area, I use the silicone brush. If I'm doing glue in a real tight spot, then I'm more likely to go to the acid brush. Another thing I'll do with the acid brush is pretty commonly, if it's a real tight spot, I'll take a pair of scissors and I'll cut the tip to further reduce its size, so it's even easier to get into a small spot. So either one, I probably use them both very interchangeably, half of the time a piece.
All right, thank you very much, George. John wants to know, what is the deciding factor in determining which finish you are going to use for your turning? Are you going to use your homemade
Visual aids.
3x3, or are you going to use your purchased friction polish?
All right, so Krista went and got these out of the finishing cabinet.
Because I'm awesome.
The homemade one, the 1-3 reference she's making there is this turning finish that I mix in the shop is 1/3 shellac, 1/3 mineral spirits, 1/3. Boy, what a brain blank there. Boy, I've done this 8,000 times. Wow. 1/3 shellac, 1/3 mineral spirits, and 1/3 linseed oil, I think. Wow, what a brain fart. I'm gonna have to think about it. And when I go back and answer the question in there, I'll double check to make sure I'm doing that right. Wow, that's horrible. What a bubble I have in my head right now. So it does settle out over time. You mix it up. It's a great finish that you can make yourself to put on bowls and that kind of stuff. An alternative that I use a lot is Mylands Friction Polish. Probably the line in the sand for me is the friction polish I can bring to a higher gloss. So if I really want to see a better sheen, Charlie sheen, Martin sheen, if I want to see a higher sheen, then I'm going to go with the friction polish to get that better gloss out of it. If I forgot to order this online, I'm going to use this because I can make it in the shop.
All right, thank you, George. Jim says, since the class in May, all I do now is turn bowls.
Darn it, Jim. It's an addiction. I probably told you that in class. Once you start turning, baby, it's like hard to stop.
When using the 4-jaw chuck, what determines if I make a tenon or a recess? I've done both, but is there a rule of thumb of when to use which? Thank you so much.
Good job, Jim, for already going to the 4-jaw chuck thing, because that's, I mean, really, for going from May to now, and you're turning, it's not that much time. So let's show what he's asking about. I'll have to show my bad bowl. So, all right, a little zoom action would be bueno. With a 4-jaw chuck, it's just like what it sounds. It's got jaws on it that will either grab an external, like I have here, or go inside an internal, like I have here. And for me, this approach is much more common, and I'm not sure I have a great reason. Well, I guess I do have a great reason. I'm lazy, and this is easier to do. It's easier to create a recess than it is to create a tenon. When I start a bowl, when this thing is still a bowl blank, what I'm going to do in what will be the top of the bowl is drill a hole with a Forstner bit. That's where the jaws of the chuck go. Then I turn the hole outside, create this recess, and then put the jaws inside there to do the inside. And then normally if I'm actually finishing the bowl, which this one I blew through, that's why I didn't do the next step, I put it back on the lathe and I turn the bottom until this is gone. I just find that a lot easier to do than to create the tenon like this. So for me, basically out of pure laziness, I'm doing the recess significantly more frequently than I'm doing a tenon.
All right. Bill is watching us from the Emerald Mountain in Colombia.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's very cool. Emerald Mountain.
Yeah, and he's planning on getting a low-cost CNC, like the Carbide 3D, the Shape and Echo, or the New Vision Piranha. Do you have any recommendations?
Haven't seen the next wave stuff, like the Piranha, I've used, but comparatively, I've not seen the other two machines. So, in broad brush strokes, CNC, I'd like to see a spindle instead of a router, if you've got the budget for it. A spindle will last longer than a router will, and also provides better torque at lower RPM than a router does. Let's see, I'd like it to be able to take 1/4-inch shank and 1/2-inch shank bits. I've seen some machines out there that only take 1/4-inch shank. And other than that, comparatively between those three machines, I can't give you buying advice because I haven't seen the other two.
All right, thanks, George. For those of you just joining us, we did have some technical difficulties, so we will be going until 8:20 tonight. Central time, so just don't worry, we have plenty of time to get to your questions, and we want to thank you guys for hanging with us until we got that fixed, and on we go, right? So Eric wants to know, how much clamp pressure is typically needed in a normal furniture panel or face frame glue up. Bessie makes Revo and Revo Junior clamps that have 1,500 or 900 pounds of pressure. 900 seems like it should be more than enough, or is there another difference? Thank you, and I love your show.
Thanks for loving the show. Here's the deal, is when you're closing any glue joint, and it doesn't really matter what it is you're making, it shouldn't take a ton of pressure to pull everything closed. Now, I'm going to qualify that a little bit and say, if you're making a cutting board and there's a ton of pieces to that cutting board, so maybe in a cutting board that's 14 inches wide, there's, I don't know, I'm thinking fast here, there's 8 or 10 glue joints because you're trying to close all those pieces. Then it might be more pressure involved because you're closing more joints. But if you're doing an edge-to-edge glue up, if you're closing a Copen style joint on a drawer or a door, honestly, I have found fingers on the handle of a clamp, spin it, as soon as that closes, you're done. So if you're finding that you have to apply a lot of clamp pressure, the joint might not be good. You can't compensate for bad joinery with more glue and more clamp pressure, because if you do, it's just going to blow apart later. The joint has to want to close on its own. And then if that's the case, then it's going to close well and you've got a good joint. What that is in raw numbers, like 900 psi versus 1500, I don't know. I can show you these, and I think these are actually what you're referencing. These K-bodies from Bessie, great clamps, plenty of pressure. I'd be fine, be happy using these for an edge-to-edge glue up. Talking too fast. An edge-to-edge glue up, door making, anything like that.
Okay, so we have a question from Tim, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this, and then I think your volume's still on in there. I might go turn it off.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so Tim just graduated from a radial arm saw to a table saw.
Good job.
When ripping, I can position the fence either right or left of the blade. Is there a preferred side of the blade to position the fence? Do I need to move, or can you answer this?
Why don't you point at the table saw and then you can go. Good idea to turn your voice off.
Well, I kind of thought I was hearing voices, and then I thought maybe.
And if you just leave a big frame like that, it's going to be fine.
Is that all right?
Hey, and yeah, so a brief sidetrack from. We'll talk about the table saw in a second. So here in my shop this time of year, fall in Wisconsin, I love to have the doors open. It's beautiful outside. The downside of that is as it gets cool outside and it's warm inside, flies like to come in. So one of the things I recently added to the shop is a bug zapper that's hanging right over here. What I used to do was I would spray with this heavy duty bug killer, and I felt bad doing it because I work in this building all day, every day, like 14 hours. And this is stuff that you'd spray in a dairy barn to kill bugs. So no more spray, no more aerosol. This bug zapper works so well. It's an Amazon product. It's just really cool. And so I'm just sharing that with you. If you have the same issue in your shop, hang a bug zapper on the wall and you'll be done chasing flies around. All right, so the question is, fence on the right, fence on the left. Most table saws are capable of doing both. The only time it's probably really going to affect you much is if you angle the blade. This is what's called a left tilt saw. That's considered from the operator side. So as I do this, as I tilt or angle the blade, when I'm making an angled cut, the safest way to have that is with the blade angled away from the fence. So if on whatever table saw you just bought, if it's a right tilt saw, when you're making an angled cut like I just set up here, then I would prefer you to move the fence to this side, because then if it's a right tilt, you're tilting away from the fence. Other than that, although I've got 12 inches of capacity on the left side of the blade. I've had this saw 10 years. I could probably count on a couple fingers on one hand the frequency with which I've used it on the left side. It just doesn't happen for me very often.
Okay, thanks so much, George. So, do you want to stay there, just answer this question, or you want to move? It's up to you.
Well, fire away with questions and we'll see what happens next.
Tom asked, I'm going to build a tool cabinet and I want to use at least 3 different types of wood. I have Sapele and I think it's bloodwood. I bought it a long time ago, so I don't remember, but I need some ideas for a lighter wood. Any suggestions?
Maple. Maple is like white. Birch is whiter. Hickory is a pretty light color. It's hard to not have knots and stuff in hickory and some dark stripes. So part of what, in addition to color, the other thing I'm considering here is woods with similar characteristics to the Sapele and the bloodwood. So like not pine, because the working characteristics would be so different. Not balsa wood, which is very, very light colored, but would be a bad mix with the other two. I don't know. How about those 3?
Okay.
Go from there.
All right, thank you. I've got someone says, hi, George.
Hello.
I'm watching from Canada.
Nice.
Can you tell whether ash is too hard a wood for turning? Would you recommend it?
Ash is what baseball bats are made out of, and those are turned on the lathe. So no, it's a good turning wood. It's a little open grain, maybe about the same as a red oak. So it's a good turning wood. Keep your chisel sharp, and you'll be fine. I've turned a lot of stuff out of ash. I've turned a lot of bowls out of ash, and I'm just looking on my shelf here to see if I have one available. What's cool is that there's quite a color contrast between the heartwood and the sapwood. So as a bowl turning, it makes for a really pretty color contrast.
Okay, thanks, George. Dave asked, I'm new to using a jointer. My edges are coming out slightly concave, like a frown. What am I doing wrong?
Well, I think you're not doing anything wrong, but your jointer is not set up right. So let's walk that way. I'm gonna grab a sacrificial piece here. So for anybody who just is jumping in, a couple things. As always, thanks to our sponsor Titebond, who underwrites the lives and makes this available for you folks. Additionally, one of the things I mentioned a little while ago, on the same page on GOA.com that you're watching, there's some information there about a compilation of projects that you can download, and have a look at that. It's pretty cool. We're giving that away. There's 10 projects in there, stuff that's real fun to build. So have a look at that. It's free. How can you go wrong? And the other thing is, we got off to a late start because we had some audio difficulties early. And it's pretty hard to do these Q&A if you can't hear my answer. I can act out some stuff. Sounds like 2 syllables. Long word movie. Anyway, so we didn't really get started until 7:20. And as a result, we're going to go until 8:20 Central Time. So here's the deal. With a joiner, there's this relationship between the infeed table, the cutter head, and the outfeed table. And when all is right with the world, the outfeed table has to be perfectly even with the top of the rotation of the cutter head. So when things go wrong, when you're using your joiner, there's one of 3 scenarios. In the perfect world, everything is set correctly, and the outfeed table is perfectly aligned with the cutter head, and you're good to go. If the outfeed table is too low, the symptom of that is what's called a snipe. You get an overcut at the end of the board, and when that happens, a lot of times you can hear it. It kind of drops off, chunk, and then when you look at the board, there'll be a spot at the tailing end where there's too much wood taken away. The other thing is, if the outfeed table's a little bit too high, well, let me back up the truck. If it's a lot too high, you'll come along and you'll bump into it like that, and even though the jointer has taken some wood off, you can't continue because the outfeed table is higher than the knives, and as a result, you're going to bump into it. If it's just a tiny bit too high, then the board might climb up on top of it, and that's what starts to create a concave edge. So what you need to do is, if your outfeed table is adjustable, and on many joiners it is, so on this one there's a hand wheel right here, and I can raise and lower the outfeed table. If the outfeed table is adjustable, you have to lower it just a little bit. If the outfeed table is not adjustable, life is more difficult. You have to go back and check your knives and get those aligned with the outfeed table. Now when you do this, here's the easiest way to make this happen. I am going to turn this in hopefully the right direction. All right, so what I did is I just turned the outfeed table, I lowered the outfeed table. So what should the result be? When I make this cut, we should get a snipe. So listen and see if you can hear that, that overcut at the, it's not that funny a sound. It's a little bit of a funny sound. And it's not quite what it sounds like, but you get the idea. See if there's a little overcut here at the end. Okay, there's the sound. So when you're setting your outfeed table, if it's adjustable, start with it sniping. Now we know it's too low. Raise it a little bit, make another cut. Still got a snipe, raise it a little bit. Still a little snipe. The last cut, the snipe is gone. So what I like about this is, kind of the temptation is put a straight edge on the outfeed table, unplug the joiner, and then also trace or feel the straight edge across the top of the knives. And that's okay, but part of the problem with that is everything is sitting still. What I really want to know is how this thing cuts when it's running. So if I experientially or experimentally mess with the outfeed table and raise it until the snipe is gone, then that's telling me, under the dynamic of this thing running, that everything is okay. So, one, that's the problem, is your outfeed table is just a tiny, tiny bit too high, and then two, that's a good way to fix it.
Okay, thanks, George. I'm going to really quick say, I've got a question from someone named David. I think we have an autocorrect problem going on with typing, because it says, can you use a player on a piece of wood that you have already epoxied?
Probably, I'm going to guess planer.
Okay, I was just going to have him, if he's still watching.
Like player with a Y?
Yeah, player with a Y.
Yeah,
so,
I'm going to say planer.
Okay.
I wouldn't run epoxy through your planer. I think it's going to chip the heck out of your knives.
Okay, and David, if that's not what you meant, can you just put it in again, and we'll get to it if we can. James asked, what is the best glue to use for joining wood pieces to make wider wood pieces?
Yellow glue. In the world of tight bond stuff, it just tight bond original. If this is an indoor project, a tabletop, tight bond original is fine. If it's going to live outside, then like you're making a patio table, or joinery for legs or whatever it is. If it's an outdoor project, bottom line, tight bond 2 or tight bond 3 for outdoor stuff, or tight bond original yellow glue for indoor stuff.
All right, thanks, George. John says, hi, George.
Hey, John.
What is your opinion on the short versus longer tools for the lathe?
It depends. If you're primarily doing, so there's a good visual here. If you head for the bench, I'll get stuff.
Okay, and while he's doing that, I'll do our commercial. We're here with George Vondriska over there, managing editor of Woodworkers Guild of America. If you don't do so already, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Go out to WWGOA.com and sign up for the completely free newsletter. And we want to thank Tight Bond for sponsoring this to make it completely free to all you guys and gals watching.
So let's do this. Chisel length, short chisel, long chisel. This is a skew that I would only use turning spindles. This is a bowl gouge that I use, oddly enough, when I'm turning bowls. Kind of a baseball bat comparatively to what I have here. With spindle turning, you don't have the leverage of the work against you that you do when you're bowl turning. So a shorter handled chisel like this on a spindle is going to be fine. Because as I'm doing that turning, I don't have to bear down on this as much. With a bowl, you never want to cantilever the chisel out further than you have to, but especially when you're hollow on the inside, you do get into scenarios where this is past the tool rest a little bit more. As the bowl diameter gets bigger, we've got more mass, more torque, more momentum going there. So it's a case where having more to hold on to out here so that I can really keep down pressure on this and make sure it's not lifting. We need that leverage. I'm going to say, it's pretty safe to say that in my spindle chisels, I don't think I've got a single spindle tool that's this long. Many of my bowl turning tools are this long or longer. So line in the sand, spindle stuff can be short and bowl stuff is going to tend to be longer.
Okay. James would like to know, would an oil-based finish be the best finish for a dresser top? The dresser is over 70 years old, made with figured walnut.
Sure. Benefit to oils is that it's easy to put on even in a dusty environment, because you apply it, you wipe off the excess, it dries. Even if dust falls into it, you just wipe that off, do another coat, you're good to go. The other thing, I used oil like Watco Danish oil is kind of what we're talking about here. I used nothing but that for the longest time, because the other thing I liked is you can always rejuvenate it. If it starts to look icky, you can wipe a new coat of oil over the top and it's going to look good again. Whether it's the perfect finish for you, it depends on your finishing environment. It's a finish that you will have to rejuvenate because it's not as durable as lacquer or a polyurethane. So if you're okay with that, then sure, it's a great finish for a dresser.
All right, thank you. Len says, George, what the heck about the glue? I've been seeing you put the glue on and then never wiping it off. What is up with that? And thanks for what you do for all in the community of sawdust makers.
Well, thanks for the nice comments. Yeah, I never do wipe off excess, but I cut off excess. So my feeling on this is that sometimes what you'll see people do is there's glue squeeze out and they get a damp rag and start to wipe that squeeze out down. And my feeling is that glues are water soluble. So what you do when you wipe that is you're diluting the glue and pushing it further into the pores of the wood. What I would rather do is leave it stand proud, leave the glue drops consolidated, all in one spot, and then wait maybe 15-20 minutes, and depending on how big the glue beads are, they'll dry to a point where you can come along with a putty knife and you can just cut them right off the surface. So the picture in my head at this second is an edge-to-edge glue up where we've got all these beads of glue going down the seam. Let that project lay flat, let that glue up lay flat. 15 or 20 minutes after the beads form, slice them off the surface. And it's the easiest, I think the best way to get that glue off. Inside corner on a box, same thing. You get that squeeze out on the inside corner, let it cure just a little bit, slice it out with a putty knife, or I don't think I have any here. These are my good chisels. I've got some chisels in the shop over in my gluing area that all I use them for is cleaning up glue. I don't sharpen them uber sharp, I sharpen them on a belt sander. And that gets them plenty sharp for getting glue out. On something like an inside corner, maybe where a rail meets a leg, mortise and tenon joint, the chisel is going to work better at cleaning that up than a putty knife will. So the key is, if you go too soon, the glue's too wet, and when you try to slice it off, it's going to smear. If you wait too long, the glue's going to cure, and you're never going to get it loose. So there's that window of opportunity in there that you've got to find. It'll depend on your particular environment in your shop, how dry the wood is, how dry the air is, how warm it is that particular day.
Okay, thank you. Doug says, I have an oval kitchen table that has a laminated top with an oak edging around the laminate. The oak edging, which is approximately 3/4 inch to 1 inch wide, needs to be refinished. What is the best approach to refinishing this edging?
I don't know. I'm not a refinishing kind of a guy. You need an expert in the field, and that ain't me. I don't know what the deal is with modern strippers. It's so long since I've refinished a piece of furniture. So I'm sure they've come a long way from the uber strong stuff that can kill you. Sorry, I'm not your guy for this one.
Stan asked, I recently used some cedar on my patio. I then needed a curved shelf for my observatory and decided to use the 3-inch wide scraps from the patio job. I edge glued several of these together with Titebond 2. I did not let them dry very long and tried to run them through the planer. Several joints failed. I did it again and let them sit overnight. Next day, when removed from the clamps, I was able by hand to pull 2 of them apart. I re-glued them again, clamped them for 24 hours, and they have sat all week. I am afraid to try and work with them. Have you had any issues gluing red cedar?
No, but so one question would be, how old is your glue? Because glue does have a shelf life, and it's around a year, so it's pretty long. But it's possible that your glue has gone bad. The other thing is your joinery. So I probably don't have 2 great pieces here to show. These, I'm going to show you this, but that being said, these boards have not been jointed. So your measure of can I glue these 2 boards together or not is when I do this, and that's a good seam, you should be able to hold them by hand, and if you can do this and hold it up to the light, you should not be able to see any light through those. And if you can't pass that joint test, you shouldn't be gluing them yet. So the edge has got to be perfectly straight, perfectly smooth, perfectly square, and then any glue is going to do a great job of holding them together, and the resulting joint will be stronger than the surrounding wood. So if you have new glue and these boards are dead straight, so that when you do this, you know you're getting a good bond, you could try, and if this next go around fails, you could wipe the wood with acetone right before you put it together, and maybe there's an oil in your particular woods that's preventing the glue from bonding. So I've not heard of this with cedar, and I've built a lot of stuff out of cedar, a ton of Adirondack chairs. So I haven't heard of this with cedar, but a lot of tropical woods have oil in them that won't let glue bond. So the cure for that, when I build a guitar, right before I glue the fretboard on, right before I glue the bridge on, I wipe it down with acetone, let the acetone dry, it flashes off just like that, and then immediately glue it before the oil can come back to the surface. So if you got new glue, if you got good joints, and if this next go around fails, clean up the edges, wipe them down with acetone, then once the acetone dries, glue them together and see if that does it.
All right, thank you, George. Jason asked, my measuring tape on the right side of the blade on my rigid table saw is accurate run using over 18-inch settings, but it is off progressively more as the width from the blade is smaller. The adjustable marker can't be the issue as it is accurate at wider settings. Do you have any ideas?
Think you need to replace your tape? I mean, either it's graduated, either every little line is a 1/16 of an inch apart, or it's not. So maybe the day they printed that one, they didn't do such a good job. So, yeah, it can't be the cursor, it can't be the pointer. So yeah, it's just, I guess visually when you look at it, does it look like the spaces are further apart from 0 to 18 or closer together than they are from 18 up? And if that's the case, it's just a self-adhesive tape. Peel it up and put on a new one.
All right.
And you don't have to put, a lot of people make self-adhesive tape measures. Craig sells them. So you don't have to even get one from Rigid. You can get it from anybody and stick it on there.
All right, thanks. John asked, how good is Purple Heart for turning for pens?
Oh, Purple Heart is pretty good. It's an interesting wood. It's close grain, so it turns well. It's hard. It's hard on your tools. It's best if you got high-speed steel chisels, use those instead of tool steel chisels. And be ready to be a little bit disappointed maybe. When it's freshly cut, it's the color of bubble gum. It oxidizes over time, and that beautiful grape, what I meant to say is it's the color of grape bubble gum. When it oxidizes over time, it gets a little bit brownish, and that really, really cool purple kind of goes away. How to prevent it, how to prevent the go away aspect of that, I have yet to figure that out. You can seal it, but I'm not sure it's really oxidizing. I think it might be a UV thing. So you gotta mess with that.
All right. Joe says, "Hey, I love your videos. I just bought my first wood turning lathe.
Cool.
What sort of things would you recommend trying to turn first?"
Well, you can answer that question, Krista.
I was gonna finish the question though.
Okay.
Any particular ornaments or techniques?
Ornaments.
Yeah, it says ornaments.
Oh, I don't know.
Like, I would assume like turning an ornament.
Well, so was the first thing you turned? You've turned what, probably half a dozen things?
Yep, the first thing I turned was a pen.
So, and the thing, and it's all right, so was that a pleasant experience?
It was a great experience.
So the thing that's nice with pens is it's a small scale turning. The downside is they can be a little bit fussy because you got to get the turning to match the diameter of the pen parts. So part of the question would be, do you want to do bowls or spindles? My turning of bowls outdoes my turning of spindles by a factor of 99 to 1. I do way more bowls. So where to start? That was actually the question, right?
Yeah,
what to do first?
Turn a pen.
Here's what I think would be a good idea. One, if there's a place near you where you can take a turning class, I do bowl turning classes here all the time. Woodcraft and Rockler stores often offer them as well. I would say it's a great idea to go and do a class with somebody, and it'll cost you a little bit of money and 3 hours of your time, but you're going to get a lot of great tips, and somebody's going to be leaning over your shoulder to make sure you're doing stuff correctly. If that doesn't happen or can't happen, pick something that you want to make, and this is just my advice with projects in general. If I tell you what to make and you don't really want that thing, then you're not going to be invested in mastering what it takes to make it. If you look and say, there's a beautiful bowl, I'd like to duplicate that shape, there's a garden dibble, there's a mallet, there's a gavel, something like that, then a pen, a shaving razor, whatever it is, and it's a thing that you want, then you're going to be more motivated to figure out what's it going to take to get you from start to finish. So just in general, that's what I tell people picking projects. You got to do what you want to do, because if you're just doing what somebody else mandates, it ain't going to be much fun, and you won't be very motivated.
And isn't that the beauty of turning, is they have all these products that you can look at when you're first starting out and say, that's cool and I want to try that. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, there's a gazillion. Turning is pretty endless.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options.
All right. Jay says, how is the router table set up to do edge jointing on a board? I have an Ingra router table.
Incra, probably.
Incra.
So let's fast forward over this way toward the router table. And it's a little serendipitous. Just a little while ago we were talking about the jointer, and one of the things I said is that put those away. The outfeed table on the jointer has to be perfectly even with the knives, and then of course the infeed table is a little bit lower. To joint on a router table, you got to do exactly the same thing. You've got to have the outfeed table has to be slightly offset from the infeed table. Slightly, a 32nd, maybe a 16th of an inch. So one of the ways that you can make that happen is by, on this Jessen table, I can add, I'm looking to see if they're in here, I've not used these for a while. might not be, because I haven't used them for a while. The Jessam table comes with shims. One of them is a 32nd of an inch thick, one of them is a 16th of an inch thick, and they go behind the outfeed table. And that offsets it, that pushes it out so that the plane of this face no longer lines up with the plane of the infeed face. And that's the offset that we need. Then you make that outfeed fence even with the router bit. We've got an article on this on GOA.com, and when I sit down and answer the questions, I'll make sure that I find that and I put a link for it. If you've got the Triton system that goes in their table, it's not a shim, it's the same concept, but it just works a little different. There's just a spacer that goes behind the outfeed fence, and that, again, it just offsets it. If whatever you have at your shop doesn't offer this, this does the same thing. So what I did with this is I made a melamine fence, all one piece, and then on half of it, this has half of it, I glued a piece of plastic laminate. So if you get laminate that is designed for kitchen countertops, it's a 1/16 of an inch thick. So because the laminate is here, but not here, this face sticks out a 1/16 of an inch further than this face. So it gives you that offset. When it comes to lining it up with the router bit, the best thing really is for me to point you toward a video or an article that we have on GOA, and it's going to take you right through that step by step.
Okay, thanks, George. Harry is very grateful for the show.
Cool.
And
thanks for watching, Harry, or we wouldn't have a show.
That's right. He would like to know, if you had to choose between a planer and a joiner, which would you recommend? And also, between the DeWalt versus the Rikon. He says that the Rikon has higher RPM and helical blades for just a little bit more than the DeWalt.
Well, you can't really. It's hard to do. It's hard to do a one or the other because they do such distinctly different things. If you have to get one today, well, I don't know if I can even go down that road. There's so many workarounds in woodworking that I know people that operate. I know people that work without a jointer very successfully and effectively. We just talked about jointing on the router table, so that's a workaround. You can use, many projects require a perfectly straight edge, and the way a lot of people achieve that first straight edge on a Kerflooey board is with a track saw. So that would give you a nice straight edge and a good cut quality. So that would supplant what a joiner does. With a planer, how many ways are there to get 3/4 inch material down to 1/2 inch? Not so many, but there are choices out there. So I think part of what it comes down to is deciding what kind of woodworking you're going to do. If you're going to do lots and lots of edge-to-edge glue-ups, I would probably throw a jointer into the mix pretty soon. If you're not that concerned about edge-to-edge glue-ups, but you do want straight edges, like I said, you could achieve straight edges with a track saw and a table saw and go without a jointer for a long time. Like I said, I know a lot of people who do. Between the two, that jointer I have has helical knives in it, and they are a wonderful thing. My old jointer did not. I love the helical knives in there. So if it's in your pocketbook to do that little bit of an upgrade, to pay a little bit more and get the helical knives, I'd say go for it.
Okay, perfect. Joel says, hello, I just joined WWGOA and I'm very impressed. I am from Monroe, Wisconsin, and my local sawmill has a great selection. However, I'm considering starting to mill and dry my own logs. Have you ever done this? I
have. I own a chainsaw-based sawmill. I've air dried quite a bit of wood. My perspective on it is the downside to a chainsaw-based mill is there's more waste than a bandsaw mill, and it's a slower process. So I'll cut something if it's a nice special chunk that I really want. Big picture, I'm not going to take the time to cut every stick of wood that I am ever going to use. Now, a lot of woodworkers do. Matt Cremona is a great guy to watch. He's a Minnesota guy. He built his own bandsaw mill, which that alone is amazing. And he saws every stick of lumber that he makes, that he needs for his projects, and air dries it. Amazing stuff. You can check him out. He's got a lot of great information out there. So yeah, I've done it, and I think it is very cool. It's very cool when you have taken a tree, processed it to a plank, dried it, and then waited, because air drying takes quite a while, and then you're actually getting your hands on that thing and turning it into something, and every step of the way has been your hands making that happen. That is very cool. I consume a lot of red oak when I can buy that for $2.20 a board foot, dried, straight lined, and planed. I'm not going to take the time to cut up a red oak tree and then wait a year for it to dry. So it's just it's a time evaluation for me.
Okay. So it is 8:15. We're going to 8:20.
Yep, 5 more minutos.
This may be our last question, and just a reminder, if we don't get to your questions tonight, George does sit down after this live and answer all of the questions. So, check back later, it will be answered, okay? All right, so Steve is making some table legs that will be close to 1.5. Oh my gosh, my internet just went down. Okay, 1.5 inches wide.
Okay.
Okay, and hang on, I think it's coming back. Okay, it's 1.5 inches wide and thick.
1.5 by 1.5.
Yep, he's making them from flat sawn 3/4 inch wood. So he needs to rip 4 pieces for each leg so that each piece will have a triangular cross section. I'm trying to figure out the best or safest way to cut them on the table saw. How would you recommend doing the beveled rips?
So you're trying to have a show face on each face. Trying to get a plain sawn face on each. So what he's combating here, if I'm understanding this correctly, is 2 things. Let's
and while George is selecting his pieces to demo, we all know how much you like it. Go ahead and put where you are viewing from.
Okay, so this is a really small piece of cherry, but hopefully it'll help me tell you what I'm thinking here. So if you want legs that are 1.5 by 1.5 and you're working with 3/4 inch stock, one approach would be we take our pieces, rip them to a little more than 1.5 inches, glue 2 of them together face to face, and then machine them down to their final size, 1.5 by 1.5. One downside of that is that when I do that, when I pad those 2 pieces together, and then I look at the edge, there's going to be a glue seam. The other is that when this is a piece of plain sawn lumber as opposed to quarter sawn, so when I look at this face, there's a cathedral pattern, there's a pretty dramatic grain here in this piece. When I look at the edge, the grain is very, very straight. So not only do I have a glue seam, but there's a dramatic appearance difference between this face and this face when I glue the pieces together, because it's 2 different cuts from the wood. So cleverly, what he's trying to make happen here is if he could you just grab my felt tip, please, off of it? It's on the tool chest by the Powerade. And I think yes, ma'am. Thank you. What he's trying to do is a leg. So this is a piece. This is a piece. This is a piece. This is a piece. And when you do this, it's a cool idea. The outside faces are all going to look the same. Plain sawn, plain sawn, plain sawn, plain sawn. So his question is, how would I do this? It's a great question. Getting cut number 1 is relatively easy. So set the bevel on your blade to 45 degrees, make this rip. That gives you this cut on all your boards. Then what we need is that. I think what I would do is think for a second. Here's the other consideration I'm trying to roll into this is that if you rip all of these pieces and you're off by half a degree, when you go to put them together, they're not going to come together. So what I'm trying to think through here is there a way, is it safer to do a glue up that looks like this? Did I just do that wrong? No. Because then go back and do this cut and this cut. Yeah. So I think that's what I would do. I need a new drawing board. So here's what I think I would do. Okay. A lot of sawdust on there. Take a board. Take two boards. Rip them. 45-degree bevel. 45-degree bevel. Get that in the right spot.
Yeah.
Get that as accurately as you possibly can. Then take those two boards and glue them together like this. Then go back to your table saw and with the blade set at 45 degrees, cut both of these at once. And you're going to do that same thing to board number 2 or glue up number 2 over here. And then you're going to glue this to this. And what's cool about this, if I got this right, is that because you cut both of these at once, that's going to be one flat face. And that's going to be one flat face. So that piece has to go against that face without being ill-fitted. I think if you try to make all 4 of those beveled, you try to do all 4 pyramids and then glue them together, that's like, I ain't got enough hair left to pull my hair out over this kind of stuff, and that's what's going to happen there. It's going to be so hard to make those absolutely perfect so they go together. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's what I would do.
Okay, thanks so much, George. Maybe we should head back this way here, and I'll give you the, where
Rundown.
people are viewing from all over the United States. We have some viewers from Colombia. We have viewers from the Philippines. We have viewers from London, Trinidad, West Indies, or is that Trinidad, the West Indies? I'm not
Trinidad
really sure.
is new, I believe.
Yep. Ontario, Australia, you name it, all over.
Nice.
Yep. So I think we're all done because we're at our time.
We are.
Again, thanks for sticking with us during that technical difficulty. We're glad that you viewed. We want to thank Type On for sponsoring this, so it's completely free. Remember, we will be back next month to do this all over again. George is going to sit down after this and answer the questions, and he'll go ahead and, I think, timestamp them as well so you can reference them on the video. And if you are not doing so, go out and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and sign up for the completely free newsletter. Anything else, George?
So yeah, a couple things as we wrap up here. One, I mentioned it a couple times tonight. On the GOA page where you're watching this, there's the ability to download a little project packet. 10 pretty cool projects in there. The thing is free. Have a look at it. Download that. Give you some ideas for what to make for Christmas, which is going to come up surprisingly fast. If you're out and about, and I realize this video gets archived, so check the dates, but September 16th, 2 days from now, I'm going to be doing a turning demo at the Rockler store in Minnetonka, Minnesota. I'll be there all day, 9 to 6 are the store hours. So I'll be there running bowls and spindles on the lathe all day long. And then coming up in the end of September, I'm going to be at the Woodcraft store in Appleton doing a bunch of CNC classes. So you can check with the Woodcraft site to get to the Appleton, Wisconsin store. That'll let you sign up for those if there's still space available. And then in October, I've got a few local classes at Farrell Equipment in Eau Claire and Farrell Equipment in Wausau. If you're anywhere in the Wisconsin area, you can check those dates on my website, on the Vondriska Woodworks website. So other than that, thanks to Krista for running the camera. Thanks for Sam for running the board. Sorry we started out with technical issues. Thanks to Sam and Krista for getting on top of that so we could actually go live and you could hear what I was saying, because that's what we ran into before. There was zero audio. So thanks for watching, and we will see you next month, second Thursday of every month, 7 p.m. Central Time. See you next time.